Okay, hello. This is going to be a very brief instructional video on essentially cutting safely. We're also going to cover blade removal, blade changing, as well as how to cut a proper square. Okay, so I got a few things that I'm going to need. Let me remove this stuff. Well, we'll name it as we remove it. So we have just a couple pieces, a couple sheets of cardboard. One side is good, one side is not so good. But that will be the material we're actually going to be cutting today. We got a ruler or a straight edge. I think yours is a little different, but this will suffice as a stand-in. Pencil. We have a couple kinds of utility blades here, and we'll refer to these as utility blades from here forward. We have a kind of old school style here. It has a little notch on the top, blade open, blade closed. And we have this style here. This is kind of a flip or switchblade kind of style, I guess. So that actually hinges and opens and then locks in place here when the blade is actually opened up there. So let's put those both aside just for a second and talk about this. So what I have here is my cutting surface. What I would like you to do to protect your floor, table, I do not recommend doing this on a bed or mattress, but I suppose you want to protect that too if you really had to. A nice hard flat surface is what you want to be working on. I know we're unlimited resources though. Anyway, what I have here is I have just a doubled up layer of cardboard. This is kind of junky cardboard that, it's got a couple creases in it. It's not great for using in the actual project. Maybe you've got an old box lying around or could go and find one. Or I guess you could sacrifice a couple of sheets of what we've been given to you, what we have given to you, sorry, as a kind of cutting surface. Now what this is for, this is what you'll work on top of for any cutting that you're doing, possibly even gluing and assembling too, but definitely cutting. This basically will allow the blade to cut through the material that you're going to be cutting and not go through to the table or the floor or whatever it is that you might be on top of. The blade, as you can see, is a little deeper than the actual depth of this material, but we'll just be cutting through just about that deeply most of the time, and so this should suffice. 2 layers of cardboard should be fine. If you want to be extra careful, I suppose you could use 3. Okay, so let's talk about these utility knives and the blades and blade changing. So, oh, forgive me, I don't, one second. Okay, I'm back. So this is an old school style knife, and this opens up with the help of a Phillips screwdriver. I don't know, I'm at home right now. I don't remember. I know there's a couple models of knives that have gone out to you guys. I think they're a little more modern than this, but just in case, we'll kind of walk through this one just really quick. So you back that screw out. Just put that aside. Important not to lose that. If you're setting this down on that side that the screw is removed from, you should be able to then remove the housing. So the top half of that, and inside you can see how this is actually going to work. So this little frame here, this guy, slides back and forth and has the blade basically presented and then tucked away. So we'll put that back in its slot. I like to just keep that there and actually pull the blade out. I'll talk a little bit about, we're talking about cutting safely. I'll address sort of, when the blade gets dull and things like that. You'll be changing it, a couple of times, I would guess. You always want the blade to be nice and sharp so that you don't have to pull very hard to make any kind of cut. To put the blade back, excuse me, I thought I had to sneeze. To put the blade back, just make sure that these 2 notches here just fit into the notches at the top of the little slider. Sets right there. There's usually a little ledge or edge at the back side of that helps you seat that down just right. Just have it resting in the slot. And then go ahead and fit that upper housing back in place. And you'll know if it's going to be working or not even before you put the screw in. You can actually, push the blade forward and backward. That should be moving back and forth nicely when you depress this button here. Then just go ahead and replace the screw and you're good to go. It's probably safer to put that down flat on the table and to have the blade all the way retracted. All right. Make sure that's snug. And then there you go. So that should be working just fine. Always when you're not using these, go ahead and retract the blade and put that aside. All right, so this model is a little bit of a kind of switchblade model that opens up and locks in place. There's a little knob or something back in this zone that will release that and allow you to, come on now, there we go, allow you to then go ahead and close that down again. This is like, the belt loop style. Some of you might have this style as well. So let's open that up. Now these feature a kind of quick release system. So here's a little knob here that we want to pull back toward us. That's on a little spring. There the housing slides aside. We can remove the blade. Do keep in mind this blade will have two cutting surfaces that are available to you. Just flipping that over will get you a whole fresh blade. So there's about twice the amount of cutting time that we might guess initially. So we'll set that back in, slide that back forward, and that clips right in, the spring locks in place, and that is all nice and together. Make sure, just kind of touch here, wiggle the blade, pull on a little bit, make sure it's really in there, make sure it's stable, and again, if it's not in use, let's close that up and put that aside. All right, let's get into making a proper cut here, because that's why we're here. All right, so initially, I'm just gonna cut across this cardboard really fast here, just to give you a sense initially, and then we'll work on making a proper square. Just a quick note about cardboard anatomy. So here's the edge of the cardboard where we can see its anatomy really clearly. And as you probably know already, cardboard is just paper, okay? It's like 3 layers of paper, really simple. We have a flat layer of paper on both sides that sandwich and are glued to a corrugated layer of the same paper. This simply rides up and down, and when these two pieces are glued to either side of it, it keeps that still and sandwiches that in place. And that's what gives cardboard its structure, its rigidity. That's really all it is. It's just that simple. But one way to think about this in terms of cutting it, though, is a lot like how we think about wood. So we think about wood in terms of its grain, and we often want to, well, not want to, we often want to cut the grain in both directions, but we should remember that cutting along with the grain, so in the case of the cardboard, if I'm cutting along with these, you can see these subtle ridges that mark those corrugated surfaces there. If I'm cutting with the grain, it's really easy to cut. I'm only needing to cut through just the 2 layers of paper that are sandwiched on either side, and the third layer that's in the middle there often is just sitting abut the other one. You don't even notice it. It cuts really easily this way. Now for cross-cutting across the grain, so as I'm cutting through each of these discrete ridges here, that's a little harder. The tool's going to tend to chatter just a little bit. It'll be a little bit more of a difficult cut. It is just cardboard, so you should be able to get through it pretty easily. If you need to make 2 passes with the tool, that's completely fine. So let's make a cut. Let's do the first one just with the grain here. And what I'll do is I'll just set up the ruler. Let's decide, though, because this project is going to be about being careful and about being making measurements and things like that. So let's go ahead, and even though we're going to make this cut, let's measure over, we'll make a 1-inch wide strip. So we'll just measure over 1 inch. So I'll go over 1 inch from the edge here. I think you can see that. And I'll make a mark. Do the same thing down here and make a mark at 1 inch. And I'll put the ruler across those 2 marks. I use that little arrow shape so I know right at the pinpoint of where that mark should be so that it's a little bit more accurate. And I'll just scribe a line down through both of those. I think that's okay. All right, so we'll spin that around just for fun. I always like to have the larger amount of material to my left, where my non-dominant hand's going to be holding it down, holding the ruler down, and the smaller amount of material is what I'm actually going to be cutting off of there. So let's set up the ruler. The line is there though, just so you know, in case as you're cutting, if the ruler should shift or something like that, you know right away because you won't see that line anymore. It'll either disappear under the ruler or go this way or that. It's just kind of an insurance policy that keeps us on the ball. Okay, so we'll set that up and let's talk about safe cutting. So I'm going to extend the blade all the way. This might seem counterintuitive, but I want the full blade available to my eyes so that I can see what I'm doing and see where everything is going. In this fashion here is how I'll be cutting. This way I can see the blade. If the blade's only out this far through the tool and I'm cutting, I can't really see what I'm cutting. And I'm probably, this might seem safer, but it's going to be less accurate, and it's not going to be any safer actually. I could still cut myself with this. The problem here as we're cutting is if it should shift or something like that, the tool, the body of the tool blocks a lot of what you're doing from your vision, and you won't be able to see those little details, and it might shift and you might actually cut on an angle that you don't want. So get that all the way out there and you should be fine. As I'm holding my ruler with this hand, I want to be conscious that my fingers are not in the line of the cut, so this would be terrible. I want to have those on the other side of the ruler as far away from the cut as I can possibly get. A couple other quick things to note before we do this. Go nice and slow. As we're cutting through this, we're going to progress at about this speed. At about that speed, which seems painstakingly slow. It's tempting to go ripping really fast through here, but that's when you could jump over the ruler, hit your thumb or finger, or jump off the back of your cut and actually hit your body. We do not want this, of course. Just make sure my point of view is good here. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a cut. Starting at the top here, I like to put a finger right on top of the tool. I'll pull it back a little so you can see what's happening here. And I'll just slowly start to work through the material. If you need to pass through your cut twice or even 3 times, that's far better than trying to really pull on it too hard and end up hurting yourself. So we'll just go through twice just for fun, and you can see that jumped out of the way. That cut really easily with 2 cuts. I don't think it was quite all the way through on the first cut, but the second cut got it. So that should be 1 inch wide. That should be pretty proper. That'd be good building material, I think, if we needed it. Okay, so now we'll do a couple more cuts, and in the meantime, we'll also talk about how do we make a proper square. So let's presume that that's a good cut, meaning that that's a totally straight edge. It's not curved, it's not ragged. We'll presume that that's good. And all you need is one good straight edge to begin with. So make an arbitrary cut to get that good straight edge. And that looks good to me. Now what we're going to begin by doing is we're going to be working in parallels. So we're going to use this as our square edge to begin with. We're going to move over to this side and we're going to find out, is this edge in parallel to that edge? So let's just find out to start with. I sometimes prefer centimeters in life, but for our purposes here we'll go with inches. So I have inches here, and I think your yardsticks only have inches, so we'll work with that in this project. So we're at 8 1/4 inches right there. And if we slide that down the line just a little bit, if that's in square or in parallel to this other side, that should be right at 8 1/4 as well. And I can see that it's just a hair shorter, a 1/16 of an inch, meaning 1 notch shorter. That's not good enough for me, no way. So what we'll do, we're going to bring this in and have this be square. Let me see how much material I'm working with here. So this is a little less than 8 inches. So let's make a 7-inch square. So what I'll do from this good side, remember, I'll measure over to 7. I'll make my mark, move up the line. I'll make that mark again, right at 7. And now I know after I make this cut that those 2 edges are parallel to one another. And then we can work on the 3rd and 4th side. Let's see, let's get that out of the way, let's get that out of the way. Quick drink. It's important to be well hydrated while you work. Makes us happy. If you like tea or coffee, you could do that too, I guess. I sometimes like to have a cup of coffee while I work. All right, so let's make this cut. Oh, wait, we haven't made the line. I did that purposefully to remind us. Seems like an extra step often to draw that line, but it's insurance. It lets you know, okay, something has shifted. If something has shifted, it lets you know where you should be. This project's going to be really emphasis on craftsmanship, and craftsmanship is just a kind of glorified term for care or caring. So if I care for this, I'm going to measure everything really carefully. I'm going to cut carefully. I'm going to be certain that everything's proper. Okay, so from here to here should be 7 inches. From here to here should be 7 inches. Just a quick check. 7. 7. Looks proper. Okay, so these two lines are now in parallel. So now we can work these other surfaces. This will be our third cut to make a square. Let's figure out if that's in square, right? Your ruler should be a square edge here, so that's the first way that I will often just at least roughly judge if something is a right angle, 90 degrees. And that looks really good to me, so that is in square. So this edge is fine. It's in square with both of these. I can feel that. And that's good. So the last thing that we need to do here, sorry, the second to last thing, the penultimate thing, is to go ahead. This is a 7-inch square, so it'll be 7 inches in both directions. We'll mark that off. We'll cut one more edge. Who would have guessed that so much work goes into a simple square? So I'm now cutting across the grain, believe it or not, for the first time, and you can hear the tool as it bumps through that corrugated layer. I'll pull that through 3 times. That's now gone. So this should technically be a 7-inch by 7-inch square. Probably rectangles are going to be the most popular shape in this first project that we're going to be working with in cardboard. But a square is ultimately about the same for our purposes here. So one way to check if a square is a square or if a rectangle is a rectangle is to measure across the diagonal of it in both directions. And pop quiz, if you are to do that, those two measurements should be the same, identical. So from this corner to this corner, we have 9 inches, and by the way, these are in 16ths, so there's 16 marks across there. We have just 2 less than 16, which is 14/16, otherwise known as 7/8. So 9 7/8 going this way. Now let's measure this diagonal. And we also have 9 7/8. So I should be proud. This is a proper square. So that's safe cutting. Remember, you want to have a substrate, a surface that works well for you, that you're not going to cut through. Change the blade as often as you need to so that you're never pulling very hard through a cut. And always go nice and slow through your cuts. Have fingers out of the way and bodies out of the way. And everything should be just fine. Good luck out there.